All right, we're back with chapter 11. I am Rosalie. I am free. Rosebud realized that Isaac Woodhouse was heading for the barn. She quickly scurried toward the sound of cackling chickens and discovered a row of neat wooden boxes along the back wall. Scat! She hissed to a fat hen on one of the nests. The hen protested loudly. Thrusting her shaking hand into the straw, Rosebud pulled out a smooth, warm egg. Rosebud? Isaac's voice startled her. She slowly put the egg in her basket, but did not turn around. Rosebud, I'm sorry for how I spoke to thee out there, but that was a slave catcher. He was looking for Harriet Tubman and the rest of you. When Lee came out of the house, I had to make him think well, I didn't want him to get suspicious. Rosebud was silent. Isaac's voice sounded miserable. Rosebud, thou must believe me. I did it to fool him, but I know it hurt thee badly. Rosebud squeezed her eyes shut and 2 tears ran down her cheeks. She felt so confused. One minute this white boy was yelling at her and treating her just like a slave. The next he was apologizing and talking to her in a kind way. Oh, Lord, she cried inside. I'm trying to hold steady on to you, but I'm all mixed up and I don't know what to do. Ignoring Isaac, Rosebud finished gathering 9 brown eggs and walked back to the house, fighting back the tears. Without a word, she set the egg basket on the kitchen table and walked up the narrow stairs to the attic room. Below her, she could hear Mrs. Woodhouse's anxious voice. Rosebud, is something wrong? Isaac, what happened? Alone at last, Rosebud let the tears come, wave after wave of loneliness and fear and confusion. Exhausted from crying, Rosebud finally slept. When she awoke in late afternoon, her stomach hurt with hunger. She hadn't had anything to eat all day, but as she crept down the attic stairs, she heard voices arguing in the dining room. The stairs creaked, and the voices stopped. Mrs. Woodhouse came to the open doorway. Why, hello, Rosebud. Did you have a good sleep? You must be hungry, poor child. The Quaker woman steered the girl into the kitchen and within minutes set a plate in front of her with 2 lovely fried eggs, 2 large muffins, a slice of fried ham, and a mug of cool milk. Rosebud's mouth watered. As she ate, Benjamin Woodhouse also came into the kitchen, followed by Isaac. Isaac told us about the slave catcher that came to the farm today, he said. I am proud that he acted so quickly to keep that evil man from suspecting that thou art a runaway, but we know it was very upsetting. We are all sorry. Thee must forgive him. Rosebud stared at her plate. Forgive Isaac? Did that mean telling him it was all right to call her lazy and good for nothing? She couldn't. Mr. Woodhouse cleared his throat. This incident has forced us to come to a decision. Thee must leave, Rosebud. It is no longer safe here. If the slave catcher asked around, our neighbors would tell him that we have no slaves. His wife started to protest, but Mr. Woodhouse held up his hand. Mrs. Woodhouse thinks that thou art not yet well enough, but we must take that chance. Thee must leave tonight. Now, we must get ready. Rosebud tried not to show her dismay. Tonight? Were they just turning her loose? But she didn't know where to go. If the slave catcher found her alone on the road or in the woods, he would surely know she was a runaway. But she obediently went upstairs and rolled her extra dress and blanket into a bundle. She retied her mammy's bandana neatly around her head, put on her shawl, and waited for it to get dark. Finally, she heard Mrs. Woodhouse call her. Oh, Lord, I'm trying to hold steady on to you, she breathed as she walked down the narrow stairs for the last time. Mrs. Woodhouse handed her a bundle of food and gave her a motherly hug. Go quickly, child. They're waiting for you in the barn. Rosebud walked uncertainly to the barn. Who was waiting? Mr. Woodhouse? Was he going to tell her where to go? There was no light inside, but as she pulled the door open, she heard Mr. Woodhouse's voice. Ah, there you are, young lady. Now up you go. The next thing she knew, he was helping her climb into the seat of the farm wagon, and from the wagon seat, Isaac held out a hand and pulled her up beside him. Isaac is going to drive thee to thy friends, all the way to Philadelphia if need be, said Mr. Woodhouse. Now go, and Godspeed. Rosebud rode silently beside Isaac as the team of horses headed north. She felt ashamed. The Woodhouses had been very kind to her since Isaac had found them in the woods. And Isaac's upsetting behavior that morning had kept the slave catcher from knowing she was a runaway. And yet, doubt still nagged at her. What about all that reward money? Could Isaac be using her to get to Harriet Tubman? It was so hard to know whom to trust. No white person had ever been her friend in all her 13 years, and yet, if she was wrong about Isaac, she was being very ungrateful. "Art thou cold?" Isaac asked, finally breaking the silence. "No, my shawl is warm." They rode on in silence once more. It was Isaac who again spoke first. "Is Rosebud thy real name?" She hesitated. Many slaves were given nicknames by their masters who might not bother to know a slave's full name, but Rosebud was the only name she had ever known. "My mammy said I was born when the rosebuds came out." "What about the rest of your family? Do they have unusual names like you?" Before Rosebud knew what was happening, she was telling Isaac about Abe and Sarah Jackson and her brother Isaac, and about Isaac running away and getting caught and being dragged away on the chain gang. As she talked, all the loneliness of the last days and weeks and months seemed to come spilling out in words. She told about burying baby Matthew and her mammy, and how one night her pappy had heard someone singing "Go Down Moses" outside the cabin, and that was the last time she saw him. But he had told her to listen for the whippoorwill after harvest, and that's how she ended up with Harriet Tubman and the others, running north to freedom. "But most of all," Rosebud said, "I just want to find my pappy again." Isaac was thoughtful for several minutes. "Abe, Sarah, Isaac, did you know thy family is named after one of the most famous families in the Bible?" Rosebud shook her head. "Abraham loved God, and God promised that he would be the father of a great nation. The only problem was Abraham and Sarah were very old and didn't have any children. It looked impossible, but they believed God's promise, and sure enough, they finally had a baby and named him Isaac." Isaac laughed. "That's why my parents named me Isaac," he confided. "They waited a long time for me, too. Anyway," he went on, "after many years, Abraham's family became so big, no one could even count them. They became God's chosen people, the Jews, the same people Moses led out of slavery." Rosebud was astonished. Why hadn't she ever heard this story before? Think of it. Her pappy and mammy and her brother were named after a famous family in the Bible. They had been traveling along the road for hours, and the sky was starting to get light. Rosebud thought about what Isaac had said. "Do you think that promise could be true for my family?" she ventured, "about becoming a family again, even though it looks impossible?" "Sure, why not? In the Bible, God was always doing impossible things. Even finding my brother Isaac?" Isaac Woodhouse grinned. "Especially thy brother Isaac. After all, he is Abraham and Sarah's son, right?" And it's too long, so I'm going to have to stop there. Sorry, but we'll continue the next time.